Bet this football season with MyBookie. Use promo code Gators and get a free $20 wager with your first deposit. Your winning season begins today, only at MyBookie.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And it's finally game week again, and we're doing it a special way this time. So of course, every Monday night, of course, Will Miles joins me, and he will be joining me again. You can find him at his site, readandreaction.com, and on Twitter at Will Miles SEC. Will, man, we got some special guests with us tonight. We've had this Twitter DM going I'll have to go back and look at the first message. I don't know how long it's been going on, but Neal and Malik here joining us here for this episode of Gators Breakdown. So good that we get to split it up 4 ways this time.
Yeah, it makes it easy for us tonight. We can just let these guys talk and converse with the fans and let everybody come after them when they say something that they, just a little bit different than what the conventional wisdom is. So it'll be fun.
Absolutely. So as you can see on the YouTube version, 4-way split here. Neal Blackmon from Saturday Down South is joining us here as he has before on Gators Breakdown. Neal, man, I didn't like those 2 weeks off.
Oh man, not fun. From a content perspective, bad. From a fan perspective, bad. From a COVID dad perspective, bad. Not good. I'm so happy it's a game week.
Bad. There we go. Florida defense, bad. So there we go. And for the first time here, Malik Grady's joining us right here on Gators Breakdown. I had to ask Malik, how do you want me to introduce you, Malik? So this is what he sent here, guys. Longtime Gainesville resident and UF journalism school grad who says he's now mostly just clutters up the timeline and DMs with pop culture and sports talk, and some really, really good sports talk. If you don't follow Malik on Twitter, do so at Malik G. Some really good insight for Florida football and a lot of Florida basketball talk too. So I know him and Neal talk a lot of Florida basketball and a lot of sports in general. But Malik, man, like I said, the DM, it's good having you in that direct message that we have on Twitter, man. And thanks for hopping on here.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun just talking with you guys behind the scenes and like that. It's going to be a little weird listening to you guys at normal speed. I'm used to listening to you on podcasts at least 1.5 speed. So if I'm a little off on my speed, that'll be the reason.
You can't talk any faster than me,
right?
So we're good anyway. All right, here we go. For an announcement for our next show, I've been trying to work this in, but Corey Bender from Rivals will join me. I'll do a special recruiting episode tomorrow. Gators get a big-time commitment from Jeremiah Scooby Williams, outside linebacker, defensive end type, today on Monday. We've been planning this episode, but he just had he welcomed his baby boy last week, so we kind of had to push some things around. So Corey's going to join me this week here on Gators Breakdown, guys. But heck, we'll get into it. Just a quick reaction before we get into the meat of the episode here. Gators with a big-time pickup, outside linebacker, defensive end type here for Jeremiah Scooby Williams. And here we go, Will. I mean, Gators get a nice recruit here.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you know how big a deal I think recruiting is. And whenever you can bring in a top 100 guy, it's a big deal. Florida jumps up to 8th in the rankings now on 24/7, gets over that sort of 90% hump on 24/7. And, this is a guy ranked 97th overall. Defensive end, but he's a small defensive end. So we've been talking about sort of the guys, obviously needing some help on the defensive line, but then this is one of those guys who's going to be quick and hopefully can get to the quarterback, and that's what Florida's kind of been missing this year. So it's good to have a guy with that sort of pedigree come into the program.
Malik, Neal, I'll get your guys' thoughts on it right quick. And kind of to Will's point, I guess the only, and I don't want to, this is a great pickup. Don't get me wrong. There's really no other way to look at it. But if you do want to take another look at it, and I saw it float around on Twitter a little bit and message boards, it's like, oh, here we go, another outside linebacker defensive end type. And, Florida's loaded up on that type of player the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it feels like we trust this defensive staff right now to develop players and get them in the right positions to play. I mean, I definitely want the top 100 players. We're definitely glad to have those guys, but there is that feeling in the back of your neck. Are they going to be used right? Can you use enough guys that are at the same position? Are they creative enough to do that? I'm hopeful, but a little wary, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the what's the glass half full is top 100 player, and man, C-Rob can recruit. You know, the glass half empty is like they have $7. Is one of these guys going to gain weight, or I mean, what, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, and hopefully he is, you know, an outside linebacker true type. Because, I mean, right now, if you look at it, that's probably what Florida needs to help at the most. The guy who's playing that Amari Burney position right now, can Williams be that guy and that guy that they can count on in that spot? That's where I'm looking at. Not necessarily middle linebacker type, but that outside linebacker, what we see kind of Amari Burney, James Houston in that role, and what those guys are playing now. And one more, guys, but before we get into the meat of the episode, here is – check out those babies right there. big time news of Florida drops, of course, today. And we kind of knew it was a homecoming coming up for the Gators against Missouri. And we knew they were going to wear those throwback jerseys, but the blue helmet. And I think that set Twitter on fire Monday morning. Will, what was your initial reaction to the blue helmet there?
You know what my reaction is, because I immediately messaged you and said I'm pretty cheap, but I think I might have to spring for that helmet if they put it on sale. So yeah, I like that one, man. It's pretty. The only thing I'd like to see is they're going with the white pants. I thought maybe they might go with the blue pants to sort of, you know, maybe modernize it. But those throwbacks are pretty, man. No doubt about it. It's always fun when they wear them. Yeah,
it seems they're just going to keep this jersey look, which, I mean, right now they're going back and looking at the 60s teams a lot, and that's kind of what they based last year's on too. But with the white helmet, and they kind of right now for this one they just kind of reversed the colors. But Neil, I saw you know, you got the throwback hat on. I had to throw the hat on with this logo too. Florida's got a lot of options when they want to go a route and using a different look, but this one, I think they nailed this one.
Yeah, it's so nice. You know, I love these 60s uniforms when they broke them out in 06. I know people were waiting for so long to see them again. And, you know, they're great. And for those of us that, you know, Gators Breakdown listeners, one of the best things about the people that listen to your show is how educated they are on the history of the program and how much they appreciate that. And it's cool to honor the teams in the 60s. I mean, that's kind of the standard setters for the program. It's when Florida started winning games, and I like to see it.
Malik, what was your thought on them?
Well, I think they're very clean. I definitely have liked pretty much all the throwbacks that they've done. My thing is that I really want the throw forward. I want them to at some point to incorporate what I think is the most ferocious, dangerous mascot or animal in college football. I want them to incorporate that into the helmet. I mean, you have these amazing teeth, you have the gator eye, you have this hide, and somehow you never have a helmet that incorporates that. It just seems odd to only have a cursive Gators or an F. I mean, the imagination is lacking for that. But I do love these. At some point, I don't want to echo what Georgia has with just a big G. I want a little more. You know, you have a Gator. I mean, incorporate it, you know?
I've at least thought they should do the helmets in a style of having the gator skin and that kind of be the back end. It's very subtle where, you know, maybe you catch the right reflection and you catch it, you know, not the full helmet, but.
Or the gator eye, you know, something.
Anything better than those swamp green ones from a few years ago.
Hey, those had the gator on the helmet. Malik, you got one of those?
No, that didn't have the right green for me. So I'm not sure what that color that was. Gray. I mean,
those things had the nerve to lose to Kellen Mond. You know, you can't let.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Oh. Too soon.
That's the thing about this weekend. I think if these uniforms win, they're gonna look a lot better. If somehow you have a loss, they're pretty ugly.
Nothing fires me up more than people blaming loss on a uniform.
But at least it won't be the white helmets they're blaming this time,
right?
Dave?
Oh yeah.
They didn't
give it a pat right here.
enough.
If you're watching the YouTube version, rubbing the white helmet now.
They didn't tackle hard enough.
All because of the helmet. All because of the helmet. All right, let's get in here. Let's get into this episode of Gators Breakdown. But before we do, remember you can find Gators Breakdown on news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown. There you'll find all the Gators Breakdown episodes and News4Jax coverage of the Gators. Please share, rate, and review the show. If you're checking us out live on YouTube right now, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out here on Gators Breakdown. Or if you just want the audio version, check us out on your favorite podcast platform and follow Gators Breakdown on social media. We're on Twitter and Facebook at Gators Breakdown. So, guys, of course, I think we've discussed a lot behind the scenes, and we're not the only ones, of course, looking at Florida this way, but taking a glance at the team right now, and what is the outlook for this Gator team as we move forward? And I really don't know. I mean, to me, there two things about these last 2 weeks here, and when we look at this Gator team, and first off, I mean, it was a complete shutdown as far as practice goes and football operations go. No practice, no team workouts, and all that kind of takes me to my second point. And, can Florida, I don't know if they can necessarily take advantage of a bye week. The traditional bye weeks gave you at least 3 practices, and that is now 3 practices where you get to work on the little things that you want to change about your team. That's what we usually see in bye weeks. And if there are elements of the team that can change during a season, it's usually done during that time. So now Florida was able to watch more film than they've ever been able to watch during a season and try and identify some of the issues that need to be corrected. But instead of having those 3 practices to implement the changes and work on yourself, now you got to do that in some subtle form and try and prep for Missouri at the same time. And look, we hear all the time for bye weeks, it's the time that you get to work on yourself more so than preparing for the next opponent. Well, Florida doesn't get that luxury in a year where they probably need that, at least for the defensive side of the ball. So now you have to implement these changes while also preparing for Missouri, and that's going to be difficult. So no doubt in my mind that changes are coming in the form of a simplified approach on defense and some personnel changes. But I'm not so sure we should expect results right away, given everything the team has dealt with the last couple of weeks. So I do caution the fans, and if we do see something different on Saturday, the results aren't much better, we may have to be a little patient, Will, because there is a lot of time for a lot of change and applying that change.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of it depends on who's actually playing, right? I mean, if we don't know, and Mullen was kind of cagey today about who's going to be available, but presumably there's going to be some players who just aren't available, which means some of the changes that they might have wanted to make otherwise, they're not going to be able to make. The one thing I would say that Florida has going for it positively coming into this one is Missouri scored 19 points against Alabama. Okay, that's forgivable, but they lost 35-12 to Jarrett Guarantano. Then they beat LSU, but LSU's been struggling and scored 20 points against Kentucky. So this isn't exactly the 2007 Patriots. They should be able to slow them down, get them off the field, though we said that about Texas A&M and we said that about South Carolina. But, this is not – they're not coming back and facing an offensive juggernaut. If they were coming back and facing Ole Miss, I'd be really worried. You're missing a couple of starters. You don't have you don't have time to practice. You guys haven't been able to work out. And I can see a situation where that might be more problematic than playing a team that's a little bit less explosive. There's probably going to be some opportunities to make some mistakes against Missouri that don't turn into 6. But obviously Florida's been making mistakes all season long that have turned into 6. And hopefully that's one of the things they've been able to rectify by making a few changes and getting in the film room.
Yeah, I think, Malik, the thing I'm looking at, man, honestly, in looking at this, it's all really just predicting and kind of guessing. We don't know what this team went through the last couple of weeks. We know they met a lot, and that's really all they could do. But I mean, honestly, what we're discussing here, it's a lot of guesswork till we see that team take the field Saturday.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of this game and the rest of the season, but I see there's a real opportunity because after that Texas A&M game, there was so much negativity, a lot of it earned from what the defense did, and even some squandered opportunities on offense that. Now to have a missed game and then have the COVID outbreak and then all those things going on, suddenly you're not only jonesing for football. So if you have some things go right suddenly on Saturday, if you get a 5-and-out, gasp. If you force a punt, if you get an early touchdown, then suddenly that kind of feeling of momentum, it's like, hey, we changed some things. This person is back. This person is doing different things. They actually actually play this person they said they were going to play instead of just giving lip service to it. So you have a real opportunity for those things to suddenly reset, the hopes and expectations and all. But you're right. I think anything could happen, but there's a real opportunity for suddenly flipping that switch and having a lot of goodwill.
Yeah, Neil, I mean, and I hate to be the looking at it from a pessimistic point of view, but I mean, there probably are some good things that they can take away from this. And of course, the defense and being able to identify issues that they need to identify and apply that. And like I said, maybe applying those differences or those changes may be a little difficult with trying to prepare for Missouri at the same time. You don't get your traditional bye week here, but I mean, there's got to be some positives when you go back and look at this.
Yeah, look, I think there are unexpected losses, and I feel like the Texas A&M loss was an unexpected loss. Just based on the way that A&M had been playing coming into the game, I don't think anyone in the fan base, and certainly nobody in the locker room, went to Texas thinking they were going to lose. So that leads to a lot of soul searching just generally, and then when you have 2 to 3 weeks to marinate on it, it can, you always hear it could go one of two ways. I think it's productive for a veteran team, and Florida is certainly a veteran team. I think that there should be some positives that they take from that. And I like Malik's point about confidence. It's something that we've gotten so wrapped up, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody if you read the stuff I write. But I mean, we've gotten so hardwired. It was actually in our little chat that Will made the great point that you can't always get so wrapped up in advanced analytics, because there is a confidence element to 18 to 22-year-old kids playing a game they love. And, if they can stop Missouri and Larry Roundtree on third down a couple times, just the idea that, hey, the sky isn't falling, that's a big thing. And maybe that comes playing in your backyard.
Yeah, and one point with that, and maybe we make too much of it, is maybe these guys realize the last couple of weeks how much they missed a game of football. You got a taste of it for 3 weeks. Now you got a sour taste in your mouth from what happened the last time you went out there. And look, I mean, you go back and it's kind of been out there now. Marco Wilson apologized for his play to the team. They had a team meeting and he apologized and said it would get fixed. And of course, now he's got to go out there and prove it. It's got to be more than words, and you got to go out there and prove yourself. But the word was the team rallied around him. They consoled him, and he was ready to go. And then, boom, COVID hits, and you're not allowed to go out there on the practice field and take part in practice after all that. So, I think there are some good things to point to here, and maybe some rallying points, as in, hey, maybe you get some players back. Kyrie Campbell, right before we went live here, tweeted out that it's good to be back with the Gator emoji. So it leads you to believe that he's going to be on the practice field and ready to go and play Saturday. Ethan White on his Instagram story had the camera from his point of view looking at his legs and cleats walking to the practice field. So maybe he's getting back into the rotation. So maybe that's a good point. So maybe getting some of these guys back as well that you hadn't played with all season is another, injection that you needed to right the ship after the last time we saw you. It didn't look so good, Will.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've said it a couple of times over the last week or two, is that this is probably going to go one way or the other way, and it's going to be up to the players to sort of determine which direction the season takes. Obviously, if you go out there and you're flat, or if you go out there and things haven't improved, then it can get real bad in a hurry. But at the same time, like Neal said, if you get a couple of stops, the offense, at least at the time that COVID hit, couldn't be stopped either. And so, you can envision the scenario where Florida comes out and wins this game by 45 points. You can also envision a scenario where it's sort of a slugfest and they're going back and forth, and maybe it's a high-scoring game. I don't think we're necessarily going to see a defensive struggle, but there are a lot of different scenarios you can see coming out, and certainly heading into the Georgia game, just sort of getting a little bit of confidence and getting sort of their legs under them on the defensive side of the ball is something that we all hope that we see.
You don't think we see a 9.5-minute drive from Missouri and then not score after that?
I mean, they didn't hire Will Muschamp, did they?
It didn't look like it on time some Saturday versus Kentucky. That was a Will Muschamp would have loved that game.
Drinkwitz looks like he probably pays attention to the analytics a little bit more than Muschamp does. Just it's stereotyping, but he looks like he might.
Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Like we talk about the players stepping up, and you talk about Marco Wilson, apology, what have you. I do wonder what kind of accountability or the equivalent of apologizing there is from the defensive coaches, because it's clear that some of the game plans that they've put in over the last couple of years, especially against good quarterbacks, there's something left to be desired. There's guys that don't seem lined up repeatedly, and not just young guys that have been here for 3 years, like Bernie or Steiner, or like the aforementioned Marco Wilson. And you wonder, when do they get accountable and say, hey, maybe what I think is going to work isn't working? When do they be held accountable for making personnel changes? When they say, oh yeah, we're going to get the right players in there, but you still see the same guys making the same mistakes over and over. So I don't know. I definitely think the players are important, but I would love to see a little more accountability, if not publicly, because there's turns out to do it publicly, but I hope it's being done privately with the coaches, and they're having some soul searching, because there's no margin for error anymore. You've lost against A&M, you've lost your bye week. Hopefully the fear of God is not only in the players, but in those coaches as well, for guys that who are maybe a little bit hidebound, to say, maybe I make some changes. Maybe I actually run a dime package once in a while, that kind of thing, or have some press coverage here and there. So.
Yeah, and Neal, that'll get me to my next point that you can come in here. Dan Mullen did get to meet with the media today, and first time we got to hear from him from SEC teleconference last week, but now game week, and we get to hear from him again here. And I'll go back to Saturday a little bit too. And Cassidy Hill tweeted this out, but Urban Meyer on the Big Noon kickoff on Friday or Saturday for their game did mention that Urban Meyer had to say, he breaks down the attributes of a good offensive coordinator and says they must be a defensive expert as well. He said, quote, Dan Mullen, Ryan Day, the best I've been around, they could be defensive coordinators. So that leads me to the point where Dan Mullen today said he has been involved in the defense, but won't tell the defensive staff what to do, just challenge them. So, of course, that caught fire on Twitter, because everybody wants Dan Mullen to come out and say in a press conference that he's going to fire Todd Grantham. That's what they want right now. So that's all that's going to make half of the fan base happy, or maybe even more than half of the fan base happy.
Give us Barabbas.
Immediate results is what they want right now. But it goes to the next point, and what Malik was saying. There is a point right now where these defensive coaches and the head coach himself have to step up and say, hey, this is not acceptable. And we got to have a heart to heart. And I talked about this last week on the YouTube Q&A as well. There has to be a heart to heart between Dan Mullen and Todd Grantham right now, because what we have seen their first 3 games is not acceptable.
Yeah, I mean it's bad. They're last in college football in third down defense. They're actually not last now. Nebraska is, but shout out to Scott Frost and that staff. But no, that's not fair to Nebraska. They just played Ohio State, and they've played 1 game. So they're last. The only thing that Missouri does well is on offense is convert third downs. They were 15 of 30 in their wins over LSU and Kentucky, which came in with a really good third down defense. So there's my one little analytical nugget that may mean nothing. But it is a chance for Florida to get it right against a team that tends to stay on schedule, or that when they're on schedule tends to do well, but doesn't, I guess, tend to stay on schedule if you look at the rest of their numbers. I want to see this sort of accountability. I think the one overarching critique you heard from outsiders about Mullen when he got the job wasn't, you could write off some of the nonsensical ones about the ranked opponent stat and stuff like that because it was Mississippi State, but there was a criticism that he can be a little bit intransigent, that he's not necessarily somebody who's very malleable or adaptable. And I thought he really bucked that narrative last year when Felipe Franks got hurt and they went to this pass-happy offense, to the point where in the Missouri game, in fact, he did a halftime interview where they're like, are you concerned about not being able to run the ball? And you guys remember Mullen was like, no, we can't run the ball. And it was so refreshing because it showed you that Dan will do what it takes to win. And so does that apply with Dan being the CEO and the defense? And when does that kind of accountability axe fall? What kind of adjustments are made?
Yeah, Will, and kind of going back to your article that you released today at Read and Reaction, I mean, it does beg the question because, and you're not the only one, and I'm not the only one, and we're not the only ones on here. We've identified some of the problems that we see on defense, and some of them seem pretty simple, and some of them are probably way over our head that we'll never know what to do in certain situations, down in distance and all that. And I've said time and time again, Todd Grantham will forget more football than we'll ever know. But there comes a point where some of the there does let us some easy stuff to take care of. And Will, kind of shout out to your article here and kind of what you pointed out of one. And as you said, not to necessarily single out a player, but, you singled out Jeremiah Moon. It's not all on him, but maybe something that, is a starting point for, we're talking about different players that we may see on the field Saturday. And as you said, we don't know who all will be available, but there are some things to improve upon.
Yeah, I mean, I think so the article wasn't meant to necessarily go after Moon. What it was meant to do was point out that Moon is playing a buck position where Brenton Cox is probably better equipped, because that's typically where the pass rush comes from, and he's the one who's been able to get some pass rush even from the defensive end spot. And then Zach Carter has been able to get some pass rush from the defensive end spot. And what they've done is they've brought Zach Carter in on the inside and then had Cox lining up at defensive end and Moon at buck. And they're just not getting the kind of production from the defensive line that they need. And so whether or not that's an issue with any of the guys up there, I think it's obvious, though, that Cox would really excel if they took his hand out of the dirt and had him sort of play in some of that buck role. And against Texas A&M, actually, they had Jeremiah Moon dropping in coverage an awful lot. And that's not necessarily what Grantham typically does with that guy. And so, yeah, I think there's changes to be made there. And really it's a cascading effect. So if you're not getting pressure up front, then it means your defensive backs have to hold up longer. Once they have to hold up longer, they feel less comfortable taking a risk, and they're worried they're going to get beat deep, so they play further off the ball. And then when the defensive line isn't holding up, the linebackers are starting to get mauled by offensive linemen as well. So, it's been a complete system failure on defense for the Gators thus far. I made one suggestion in terms of what could change. I think it's probably the right thing to do, but at the same time, there's probably more than one change that needs to be made. And like I said earlier, we don't necessarily know who's going to be available. The other thing that I would say is, going back to what you were saying about Mullen and Grantham, I'm a little bit confused that people are as up in arms about Mullen not just taking over the defense. He's paid an awful lot of money to be the CEO of the program. He's also very heavily involved in the offense. He doesn't have time to sit there and make sure that he's making defensive calls and things like that. He has time to go in and sort of say, hey, Todd, tell me your here's the filter through which I want you to run your defensive calls. But he's got to keep, you don't bring in people you don't trust. You don't pay people the kind of money Grantham's getting paid without giving them opportunities to change and opportunities to right the ship themselves. So you have a discussion, and then you say, hey, you know what? The last 2 years, the defense has been pretty good. And so it's not a matter of making a wrong call at the wrong time. It's a matter of, do we have the right guys in the right spot? And that was sort of the point of the article, was to say, hey, it's pretty clear that there are some guys who are being played out of position. And I think one of the things you're going to have to sacrifice is maybe to put them in position, you may need to be weaker someplace else, but the kind of production you're going to get by putting them in the right position will help you out.
Malik, does that go back to your point of coaching accountability?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one question is, you wonder how much of the defense was perhaps propped up these last couple of years by C.J. Henderson, David Reese, and then the pass rush, because those guys are gone, and you don't have those kind of easy things to rely on. And I think where Gator Nation gets frustrated isn't so much you expect him to necessarily step in and have blood. But it doesn't feel like there's just 3 games. In some ways, it feels like it's now, 2 years in 3 games, and you wish there'd be some sort of change when it comes to when big quarterbacks come on the line and all. So there's just that frustration involved, where you're just like, when you feel like there's obvious things that could be done. We've all had that thing where you're with somebody who's not versed in football, whether it's a loved one or a relative, and they're watching the game and they're seeing something which seems simple, and they say things which are especially hurtful to you. They're like, aren't you supposed to be going the other direction? And why aren't they covering that guy? And is he supposed to put the ball on the ground? And you're like, no, grandma, that's not what's supposed to happen. And it just seems so obvious in the moment. And it's more complicated than that, obviously, but it feels so frustrating when it seems obvious. You're like, well, I might pull the guy closer, or can we have another extra defensive back? So when it seems simple, it's even more frustrating to you when it's over your head, when you're watching some crazy Buddy Ryan type thing or something like that. It feels different, but when it seems simple, it's even more maddening, I think.
Yeah, Neal, I want to go back to one of your latest articles too, before we move on. But let me get a good word in from our friend at MyBookie. And ever since I started Gators Breakdown, I've had people asking me who's going to win, and a lot of time what team they should bet on. Well, the best piece best piece of advice is where you're betting is just as important as who you're betting on. And that's why I always tell people to visit my bookie. They've got deposit matches, free bets, and huge cash prizes for you to take advantage of all season long. NFL action? Check. College football? Check. Plus, they have a mobile-friendly website and top-of-the-line customer service, making their platform a one-stop shop for all your betting needs. And the best part is, my bookie has hooked us up with promo code Gators, which gives you a free $20 wager to get some skin in on the game. It's a low-risk, high-reward, which makes this an offer a no-brainer. That's $20 free bet to use on anything in the sports book, and it's completely on the house. You can't beat free, and you certainly cannot beat free money. Sign up at MyBookie today and use our promo code Gators to claim your deposit bonus. Stacked UFC cards, presidential prop bets, and good times await. Sign up today to begin your winning season only at MyBookie. So, Neal, one of your recent articles you put up at Saturday Down South, and you listed the top 5 Gators through the first 3 games of the season here. And there's no DBs on the list. No Marco Wilson, no Kyrie Elam, no Sean Davis. For Florida, and look, that's not a shot at you. I'm not saying you left anybody off. I mean, you go through and look at Florida, and if you before the season, you would have put Kyrie Elam probably as one of the top 5 Gators on the team. But through 3 games, there are no defensive backs for this Florida Gator defense on that list.
Yeah, it's pretty astonishing. 87th in the country pass efficiency defense. If you don't like pass efficiency, they're 91st in success rate defense against, which means that there's only 9 teams in America that are worse at preventing successful pass plays than Florida. That's not what you want. If you look at Florida's secondary purely on coverage snaps, right, like the number of plays where an opponent is throwing the ball, then the best defensive player in the secondary has been Jaden Hill, who theoretically is a backup corner. 77 coverage snaps played. He's allowed only 2 receptions on 10 targets, and he's registered a couple of passes defended. That's really good. Everybody else is either average in the Kyrie Elam category or not so good, at least in that aspect. I still understand why Donovan Steiner plays. I know that's kind of it borders into the hot take blasphemy crowd with some of the fan base. But yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And if it were not for LSU, the other DBU, playing as bad as they are in pass defense, I think it would be even more of a national story than it is. But, that's kind of where we're at right now. And I do think with Connor Bazelak, Missouri's quarterback, there's a chance to at least do what they did to South Carolina, right, which is kind of put an umbrella over the top, try to keep things in front of them. But do you want to do that when you have to deal with Larry Roundtree first? So, I don't know. It's an interesting game. Like, is this a game where the secondary can really get right? Or is this a game where we just need to make sure that if you're Todd Grantham and the defensive staff, you're ganging up to stop the run, and if this freshman can beat you over the top, you live with it a little bit.
Yeah, Will, that's where I'll go with you next. And you and I have hit on that topic plenty. Malik brought it up earlier as well. And look, we have plenty of time to preview Missouri this week, but one big point that I was going to make in a preview this week is Todd Grantham's success versus inexperienced quarterbacks. That's pretty much, ever since at Florida, pretty much where he's made his living is taking advantage of inexperienced quarterbacks, and he's going to face one this coming up week with Bazelak in Missouri. But as Neal said, you got to stop Larry Roundtree, especially after what we saw this past week versus a much better defense in Kentucky than what we've seen with Florida right now. So if you want to look at just the wide scope of Todd Grantham versus an inexperienced quarterback, well, history shows us it's usually stacks up in his favor.
Yeah, I mean, I think Grantham's going to throw things at other teams, especially blitzes. Some of the blitzes Mond was able to handle the other day came from a ways away, and the rookie quarterbacks or the inexperienced quarterbacks don't always deal with that very well. the Missouri quarterback here, Bazelak, he has earned this job, right? I mean, he goes 7-14 against Alabama, coming up in mop-up duty, then 13-21 against Tennessee, 29-34 for 406 yards and 4 touchdowns against LSU, and then sort of
defense that looks a lot like Florida's.
Yeah, and then came back to earth, 21-30 for 201 yards. So, that LSU game is really skewing his stats out of whack. But I don't know what to say now because I really expected the Florida defense to come out and excel against Texas A&M just because I didn't, Kellen Mond has basically been Kellen Mond for the last 3 years, and that's been a good but not great quarterback. Florida made him look like a Heisman Trophy candidate, and then he comes back out the next week and looks like Kellen Mond again. And so, if this is what Bazelak looks like against LSU, is that what he's going to look like against Florida? I just don't know. They're going to have to find a way to generate consistent pressure because I don't think they have the ability to hold up on the back end. And so I don't know how they're going to do that. The problem with A&M, I thought in the first half they were kind of playing a lot of zone but then you go back and you actually watch the tape. There were a lot of blitzes, and they just didn't get home and didn't get anywhere close to home. Now, some of the blitzes came from really weird places where the guy had to go for a really long time. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to blitz from, a safety who's basically playing a too deep coverage and then having.
Yeah, I think Donovan Steiner I think he was blitzing from Arizona in one of those plays.
So those are things. Those are schematic things, but those are also player placement things. You hope that over the 2 weeks they've been able to figure all that stuff out, right? Alignment should not be a problem after being bored to tears in meetings on Zoom for the last 2 weeks or whatever they've been doing. Alignment should be perfect, and again, I think on the Florida fans are going to be forgiving of guys who make physical mistakes, or maybe I shouldn't say that, but that's why Donovan Steiner plays, right? Because for the most part, he might make physical mistakes, but he's usually in the right spot. The problem that we've had this year is that there's been an awful lot of mental mistakes that have happened, and not necessarily one guy on one play. It's been like 3 guys on one play have made a mental mistake, haven't known where they were supposed to go. It sort of breeds mistrust where, one guy doesn't know if the other guy's going to do his job, so he cheats a little bit, and all of a sudden he's out of position on the next throw. And so I think
and even before the snap, a lot of times will.
Yeah, well, so, look, I don't know what to expect, right? I have zero idea what to expect from this game. In fact, we were joking before we came on here. I was surprised there was a point spread because I don't know. I don't know how Vegas knows how to place this game. And now the other thing is effort, right? If Florida comes out and plays full effort, they should beat Missouri just because they're better players. Mm-hmm. From a pedigree standpoint, from an experience standpoint, from the way these guys performed last year standpoint, Florida has better players. And so if the effort is there and they're in the right alignment, Florida should win this game, should win it pretty handily. But again, you just don't know what the mental state of the team is. And quite honestly, you don't know who else is going to be out there. So it's kind of hard to predict.
Anything else on defense, guys, before we move to the other side of the ball?
Well, the one thing I would say is that I do think if Kyrie Campbell plays it, because everybody's got their silver bullet, right? Like even if you look in the comments box, I've seen Hopper, I've seen Wingo, like I've seen all these names, and it's like none of these young guys are really a silver bullet for what's ailing this defense. Maybe they'll make a play or two. Guy like Mohamed Diabate, right, I think is a guy that played pretty well when there weren't many bright spots in the last couple games. But those young guys aren't going to make a huge difference. What Kyrie Campbell, with his experience and ability to get leverage on the inside of the defensive line, is a guy that can make a significant difference. So I do think that even just from a confidence standpoint, knowing he's there, it'll free things up for the coaching staff too. So that could be good. And, obviously we're all watching out for it.
Yeah, Malik, and in that thought, and I'll let you wrap up defense here. And with that thought, hopefully get some confidence to some other players too, because they're playing in their more natural spots that they want to be in, that Kyrie Campbell's in the middle. All right, well, good. Zach Carter, you can play more defensive end. That's where you've played better all season. That's where you'll be now. Mm-hmm. Brenton Cox, you're better standing up, coming off the edge. Now you'll get to do more of that. Just because, look, I'm not going to sit here and give All-American accolades to Kyrie Campbell or all SEC accolades, but what he does do is open up that defense for everybody else to play in their more natural positions.
Well, and it's also just having another starter level player who's a veteran which we know that Grantham trusts his veterans. He wants to play his veterans, and that's why Steiner is out there, snap after snap, even after certain mistakes here and there. And the kind of good news, bad news is that because they were so bad against A&M, because they were so bad defensively so far, the expectations can't be any lower. So anything you do that's positive, I think that fans are going to be ready to respond. And also going back and, switching over to offense, like you said, the offense seems to be so elite that if you just give them the ball here and there, a few stops, a few slowdowns, that offense is going to be able to do something with it that in years past, back in the, Muschamp McElwain years, that they had no chance of. But now if you just give them the ball on a 8-play drive or hold them to a field goal, all of a sudden the touchdowns can start racking up and you can have some positive outcomes.
Long are the days where when Florida got an interception, I was hoping the interception would get returned for a touchdown because I knew the offense wasn't putting it in from a yard out. So.
Amen. Like, why are you going down? What are you? Yeah.
So, we'll talk about the good here. I know we've kind of, been on the defense, and hopefully we see some good things coming. But, guys, we've seen this offense time and time again, and we've seen the good from that side of the ball. And I'll say a good sign from the offense that maybe they can keep it going is, to me, the start so far this season. First game of the season, the offense comes out humming. And look, well now you've at least played 3 games so far, and you have that game speed feel compared to the first game of the season when you hadn't played since the end of last year. So it's only 3 weeks this time. Now, I'm not saying that guarantees that the offense comes out and scores on the very first possession versus Missouri, but, I'm not going to say it's a sign of rust or immediately panic if they don't go out there and score on the first drive either. Florida's not going to score a touchdown on the very first drive of every game this coming up season. But I do like what we've seen the very first drive, all 3 games, that go down and score, and especially in that with all the offseason distractions that teams had this past offseason, going for 10 months. 9.5 months or however long it was that before you got to play a game from the bowl game versus Virginia to come out versus Ole Miss, and you go out there and put points on the board from the get-go, and you've done it in game 2 and you did it again in game 3. I really think we look at this offense and just say, okay, you may not score that first drive, but I think from what we saw all season long, that I think the confidence, it may take a drive or two to knock the rust off and get back into game speed, but I think we can feel pretty confident there, Will.
Yeah, I mean, so there's 2 things here. We know that Kyle Trask is really good at coming in and playing off of long layoffs. He's certainly shown that over his career. So you would expect, last year he comes in against Kentucky completely cold, hasn't played in a while, and all of a sudden he's out there throwing darts. So you got that. The other thing I think,
there we go. I figured out the formula for the rest of the season. Sit Kyle Trask in the third quarter, and then he'll come in the fourth quarter and throw 2 more touchdowns.
The other thing that I think is a little bit underrated is that Kyle Pitts looked a little bit nicked up in that game against A&M. And a couple of weeks off, all of a sudden that guy who was just a world beater against Ole Miss and was really sort of taking it to everybody up until maybe about halfway through the second quarter against Texas A&M has had a couple of weeks to recover. And that may be something where you look at and say, hey, having that guy out there at 100% for Missouri and for Georgia is more important perhaps than because that Georgia game is really where it's at. If you can get past Missouri and sort of get past the uncertainty of COVID, having full strength Kyle Pitts is what they're going to need to win that game. And he's had a couple of weeks to recover. So, if I'm going to look on the bright side in terms of what makes the offense go is Trask to Pitts, right? And so if Trask can pick up where he left off, which I think he has a pretty good track record of, and if Pitts is fully healthy, then I think the offense is going to go, and we probably won't have to worry too much about it.
Malik Neal, I asked this question of you guys. I think every time I log on Twitter, I see a Jacob Copeland needs the ball, or Naquan Wright needs the ball, or Kadarius Toney needs the ball more. I mean, look, Florida's running 50 plays a game right now, so it's going to be a little difficult. Look, I want to see Jacob Copeland and Trevon Grimes and other players get the ball as well. First of all, if that many players, and go back to the Ole Miss game, if that many, you go look at the stat line and how many players touched the ball, that's because Florida had 70, 80 plays a game. Mm-hmm. But, we're not going to see we're not going to see a lot of players rack up stats until we see, I hate to harp back on the defense, get the offense the ball more. And there's more the offense can do too. Will and I discussed that a bit last week as well. But I think you have to feel pretty good moving. Another thing that you can point to is Florida's deep. And like I said, we don't know the players that are going to be out there Saturday. And all we heard from opposing fan bases and the media covering Florida last year was, we don't know if they can replace all those receivers. Well, they've done a pretty good job of it through the first 3 games.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I feel like, the offense, you've seen like even the running backs, there was uncertainty because you had Malik Davis, who's, despite my namesake, he's had the injury problems and didn't have the quite same pop as he had earlier on. And you've seen him progress. You've seen Naquan Wright progress. The offensive line has shown some improvement. So there's that real excitement there. So if they can just get a few more plays on offense, you expect them to be able to really produce. So it's a very, like I said, it's a very exciting time to see this offense have those opportunities. There's a lot of pressure on them because the defense has been struggling where they need to score each time and also somehow take time off the clock while they do it. So because the defense is probably tired out, and that's a lot of pressure where you're like, okay, if you have 50 plays and you score 45 points, somehow you haven't done enough. That's a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, that running backs coach does a pretty good job of developing kids. All right. This is why I'm on the show, guys.
World's Award winner. Huh?
I don't know what else he does, but he does a great job of developing guys. Look, this offense, if you like parachuted in from the 2014 FSU game, right? And
Will's favorite game.
Yeah, you parachuted in from the 2014 FSU game when, to Dave's point, you were mad that that Brian Poole cut the wrong way on an interception, right? Mm-hmm. You would think we're in the upside down right now. And it's Kyle to Kyle that makes it go. And when you only get 50 something snaps, you better be Kyle to Kyling a lot. So I don't really have too many, hardwired critiques of anything they're doing offensively. They have to get more stops. In South Carolina and Missouri. South Carolina, Texas A&M showed you the blueprint is don't give them the ball, right? So that's what Missouri is going to try to do. They just held the ball for 43 minutes against Kentucky. They're going to come out and try to convert a bunch of third downs and keep Florida from getting the football. And every time they do that, you limit Florida's possessions. The margin for error decreases. As good as Florida has been, it's hard when your margin for error is very, very small.
Yeah.
Is there a worry, guys, that this layoff hurts the offense?
I'm not worried about it that much for some of the reasons that Will pointed out. And also, tell you what, the one thing that worries me a little bit is we kind of thought maybe defenses would be ahead of offenses from an execution standpoint. And just like I was really wrong about Florida having trouble replacing those brilliant senior wide receivers, I was really wrong with that take. Like, offenses have been ahead of defenses. And I think a big reason for that, I was talking to a member of the coaching staff this week for a piece, and he said, man, in the spring is when we iron out so many fundamentals defensively. And we just didn't get any of that time. We didn't get any of those tackling reps, that type of physicality. And he said, Nick Savage is as good as anybody at trying to replicate that. But it was just such a serious set of demands in COVID. So the thing that worries me a little bit is we come back after this layoff and like Missouri just played their best game, although they played their worst offense. But, our defense is starting to catch up, and had they used the 2 weeks where the football program in Florida has been shut down and they're kind of closing the gap on offenses. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It also depends on who was out and who is out for the offense. If there's a key offensive lineman or two, because right now the Gators seem to have 5 guys they trust. If Ethan White's back, that's probably 6. So if one of the offensive linemen is out or slowed or the timing's a little off, the offense seems like something where you really need a lot of well-oiled parts to hum as well as they need to and as well as they have been. So, it only takes a little bit of a tick off for them not to be running at full automation. And with this defense, does that matter? The clearest path to success for this team is to win shootouts. Because, to have the LSU model where your defense does enough and has some opportunistic plays here and there, and your offense just, kills the rest. That's the path to possibly getting to the SEC title game, getting the playoffs. Obviously, you don't want to get ahead of yourselves, but that's the way you expect them to be able to do that. Not suddenly the defense becoming, like the great Muschamp teams or the great Stoops teams. That doesn't seem likely to happen,
Yeah, Will, probably more, for me, this game against Missouri, probably more so for me, this game is probably more important than the rest that we've seen so far, getting off to a fast start, just because of everything that's happened the last couple of weeks. You don't want, after what this team's been through the last couple of weeks, maybe I'm making too much of it, but maybe, I don't think you want doubt at any point in this game, especially early on creeping in, because it could just be, at that point, they could start feeling sorry for themselves because of what they went through the last couple of weeks. And I don't think you want to see that. So I think it's pretty important for this offense to keep the fast start going, no matter what's happening on defense, till maybe at some point they just find their legs in this game. But I think it's pretty imperative for this offense to continue their fast starts, to keep the confidence level of at least half the team up, so they can go out there, like Malik's point, to keep on winning shootouts.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I think one of the things that's interesting is if you look back in 2018, coming off the Georgia loss and the Missouri loss, you would have said the same thing going in against South Carolina, and they fell way behind in that game. And
Good point.
And then Felipe Franks was able to lead them back, and it was sort of a galvanizing moment for the team to then come and rip off a bunch of ends towards the end of the season. So I think, a win obviously is important, but I think if they win 24-23, it's a win and you're heading into the Georgia game. Obviously, the fan base will look at that and say, uh-oh. But at the same time, an SEC win's an SEC win. We didn't get one last time we were out there. So
now, after the last couple of weeks, I'll be completely happy with a 24-23 win.
All right.
You will be, but have you been looking at the comments tonight, Dave? There are other people who won't be.
I know. I can look at the situation right now, and the last 3 weeks is just it's been bad. It's been bad with what they had to deal with.
Yeah, and then my biggest concern on the offense is who's available, because as much as you sort of joked, Neal, about the senior wide receivers, the reality is if there was an injury or two last year, that wide receiving group could sustain it. And, the offense has been much more reliant on Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney this year than they ever were on any of the wide receivers last year. Now, that's a great thing because Toney and Pitts are great, but it's a bad thing if one of those guys is missing. And so that would be my worry, is just there's not the depth, at least on the offensive side, to really sort of push through if one of those guys happens to be missing.
That's a great point. The offense is I go back to this success rate stat, and they're second in the country. The only offense that's more successful right now is Alabama. And you do wonder, Alabama just lost a big piece in Jalen Waddle. They have, we joke about insert player here, and it won't be easy to replace Waddle, of course, but they have the depth to withstand that kind of devastating blow. I don't know if this sort of team does. I mean, we've seen flashes of what Xavier Henderson can do, but beyond Trayvon Grimes, because I've always kind of been a tap the brakes on Copeland guy. So, beyond Grimes, I'm not sure who the weapon is beyond that. And that's a great point, Will.
Well, we all know, according to some out there, one conversation we had last week, it may not matter because Kyle Trask is not an elite SEC quarterback anyway.
No, he's not.
Well, now you're ruining the premise for my next article, Dave.
Uh-oh. Where are you going with that, Will?
Well, I mean, so there are things that Trask – I kind of sort of get where the PFF guy's coming from. Just from the standpoint of he's not making a ton of NFL throws out there, at least not yet, because he's got guys who are running free. Now, he's got guys who are running free because of the design and the play design and the players that he's got on the offensive side of the ball, but he has to deliver it. And so, it doesn't your point is not proven to me when he delivers a ball to a wide open back across the middle and the guy runs for 30 yards. Well, that was his job on the play. And that's the thing, is that Trask does his job. And he's gotten better from last year to this year, and that's all you can really ask. So whether he's necessarily fitting the ball into tight windows, I mean, remember PFF is the same organization that ranked Jamie Newman really, really high up, and one of the reasons they did that is because he was really good at fitting the ball into tight spaces. Well, That's important at the NFL level, but in the college level, you almost always have some guy running free on any play. Finding him is the challenge. And when you get a quarterback who could find the guy who's running free, then your offense goes all over the place. Now, in COVID, there have been a few more guys running free than maybe there were last year or the year before, but Trask is finding him. The guy's wide open, and you hit him. I mean, I don't know what else you want him to do, I guess, is my sort of point. Like, if the guy's wide open and he throws and hits him, that's a demerit. That's an interesting take.
Well, and he's also wide open because of some of the pre-snap reads that Trask has made,
Right.
identifying the defense, setting a guy in motion, seeing where the tells are, and getting that. He's sometimes got a guy open even before the play starts. And then you add on, he's climbing the pocket, he's getting out of pressure and delivering the ball on the money on the move sometimes now. That like Will said, that's advanced things that he wasn't doing last year. And I think there's opportunity for him to get even better if maybe he got 10, 15, 20 more snaps per game where you didn't feel like your bottom was on fire because you have to score this play or your defense is going to give up some points.
What say you, Neil?
I mean, I've written about it. I've kind of been a champion for Trask, I guess. I just think that, it's a great, what Malik says is spot on. I think a lot of the pre-snap stuff he does is outstanding. He reads defenses. He makes third or fourth progression throws. Mm-hmm. And he's shown on a couple different throws that even if it's not consistently making the tight spot NFL type throws that Will references, because I agree with Will, we haven't seen enough of those yet. But we've seen some of them, certainly catching a defender with their back turned and trusting Kyle Pitts to go up and get in the ball and putting it in a spot where he can get it. In the Ole Miss game, on the touchdown over the middle. We saw it on a throw to Trent Whitmore, I think in the South Carolina game.
The throw to Grounds in the Ole Miss game too.
Yeah, the throw to Grimes in the Ole Miss game. The back shoulder throw to Tony in the Texas A&M game is certainly an NFL throw, and that came under pressure as well. So I think, it's the way he handles pressure, his movement in the pocket, and all the stuff he does pre-snap. Those are things that make for elite college quarterbacks. And so, I'm not really buying too much into the narrative that he can't get it done. And we'll find out in the next couple of weeks. Look, if this defense gives him a chance, Florida has a chance to win every game they play. And if you have a chance to win every game they play, there's a decent argument that your quarterback's okay.
Yeah, I think in the couple of weeks, guys, what we all want to see is that, the comparison. We saw Alabama and Georgia play, and then everybody's like, okay, well, Florida's offense is on Alabama's level, and that's what the fan base is screaming. Well, we get a chance to see that. We actually get a chance to see that play out in a couple of weeks, and all the guessing game can go away there. And Alabama's probably built 1 to 11, a bit deeper than Florida, especially along the offensive line, but. If Dan Mullen is on and the play calling's on, then Kyle Trask is going to have every opportunity to go out there and improve that he can make those throws against the elite competition.
Yeah, man, just need the right wristbands.
Thank you. I can't be the only one dropping zingers tonight.
Zing. Hey, there's no bye week this time, so we don't have time to mess that up.
Somebody in the comments said, I saw Kyle miss Naquan right wide open and check down to Pitts for a first down instead. That's what I'm saying. That running backs coach, man. That running backs coach, he knows how to get them open. He knows how to get them running hard.
So what do you guys think about Trask's pro potential? Because to me, he's a guy that you would want to have at least bring into camp and see how I might develop and all. I'm not saying he should be like a high pick and all, but the size and how he's progressed so quickly, I think you would want to give him a shot and see what would happen.
Yeah, I mean, you are seeing mocks out there right now, first, mid to late first round, second round, picks for Trask. And I think, his smarts and I do wonder how scouts will grade not playing for so long. And then, but my thing is, he's going to have almost 2 full years under his belt, and we've seen Oklahoma quarterbacks in that system only have 1 year of great film and great tape, and go based off of that, or 2 years, kind of like Trask, and shoot up boards as well. So I think, Mullen's history with Dak and having some NFL success there and showing completely different style of offense, and then showing that, this guy, I was able to make it work with this guy, and I changed my system for this guy. This guy can, I'm asking him to do these type of things. And I mean, this is what has to win me games. So I think being able to already prove that he's a good teammate because of the story that he's went through the last couple of years, and NFL teams are going to eat that up as far as they know they have a guy that they can rely on who's going to be there in practice, in games, and be on the sideline, or be there, not get in trouble, and be the type of person first and foremost that they want him to be. But yeah, I mean, honestly, just speaking of play, I think there's enough out there to give him a shot. And I don't know if he'll be some great NFL quarterback, but I do think he is a camp arm that could really impress some guys.
I think we're going to know a lot more after Georgia.
Yeah.
I think last year against Georgia, they forced him into some things he didn't necessarily want to be in, and he wasn't really able to take advantage of the things that Georgia was giving him. Now, obviously, the windows are tight against Georgia, but that's kind of what you have to prove at the next level, is that you can deal with that. Now, one thing I think we've seen this year is more zip on the ball. He clearly has changed his mechanics a little bit and is throwing the ball a little bit harder. The other thing that you see is a little bit more pocket, actually significantly more pocket presence, where he's feeling the pressure, moving around the pocket, manipulating the pocket to give himself enough time to make some throws. Those are all things you got to do at the NFL level. So I think if he's able to carry that over through the Georgia game and put tape against an elite defense together where he's been able to be successful, then I think he jumps up into that, maybe late first, early second round. Otherwise, he's probably drafted later in the draft, and they're thinking that he's more like a backup. But again, because of the personality and the intangible aspect of that, and the fact that he's used to being a backup quarterback, I think that's something that's sort of a feather in his cap when it comes to being an NFL draft pick, because you bring in a guy who's a fourth rounder who thinks he's a starter, and you don't necessarily know whether he's going to work hard when you put him in as a backup. Trask is going to work and prepare as though he's the starter if you bring him in and put him in as the backup. I think that's a big part of it when you're in the NFL, just making sure you've got a guy who's going to prepare like he could be the starter, because he can be in one or two plays, and Trask has shown he's capable of doing that.
Well, I know he's already made me look like an idiot, because I said there's no way he'd play. So and here he is, one of the SEC's best quarterbacks.
Only proving what all of our wives already know about us is pretty much what sports.
That's true.
I thought Malik Zaire might do something. So,
Will and I were never on that one.
I mean, the name alone, it's a kingly name. It's very royal.
I did miss that.
Left-handed as well. I mean, come on.
Here's the thing: it wasn't even him. It was like, I have no trust in Jim McElwain and Doug Nussmeier to get the best out of Malik Zaire.
Nussmeier with an athletic quarterback, dear Lord.
Didn't we have like Josh Grady one year in the Muschamp years? That should have been your guy there, Malik.
Well, we keep losing Maliks. We lost Malik Langham. I mean, it's been tough, man. I'm glad we have a Malik doing well now. Although the fumble last week was a tough look, But I try to stand for the Maliks out there. So
yeah, Greg doesn't coach them to fumble.
Neal with the Knox praise all throughout the episode here. All right, guys. Neal, what you got coming up for Saturday down south?
So I got my my usual weekly game week, three matchups that will define the game coming up tomorrow. Saturday down south, I got my fresh batch of SEC player power rankings. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. I don't know what to do with Jalen Waddle now that he's out for the season. Like, I feel like I should rank him number one and just
keep it
let him have a week as like the SEC's best player, like kind of a, but it really stinks. It was very pro throw-esque too. It was terrible. Like, So anyway, those two pieces are coming up, and then I don't know if like everybody's on the media calls just thinking of the same things, but I'm doing a fun one with Kyle Trask and records, because it's very interesting. Like with 10 SEC games, like there's a lot of limitation to the types of records he could break. And yet he's still on track to like chase some of the Florida passing records for a single season. Certainly all the conference records are very much in jeopardy as he got the 2 extra games.
Yeah.
So just a fun look at that as we head into Saturday.
Awesome. Will, what you got coming up? Read reaction.
Yeah, so I already said something a little bit about the piece I'm going to have in Trask coming up. It's kind of hard to predict what's going on, so I'll put a prediction in, but I don't know that I'm necessarily going to do a whole lot of breakdown on Missouri because I think a lot of it has to do with the attitude of Florida. So take a look at Trask and some of the areas where he's improved since last year, and then my colleague Nick Knudsen, he has something coming out tomorrow on sort of a surprise wrinkle in the national championship race and how that may impact Florida a little bit. So everybody should go check that out. Nick's a good writer. He's been putting stuff up there at the site, and I'm excited to see what he's got on this one.
Awesome. And Malik, you got to keep the DM and Twitter together, man.
Definitely, man. I really appreciate, the opportunity to talk with you guys and stuff. You guys all have great perspective. You guys all love football, and you do a great job of relaying that to the people who listen to you. So that's not everybody does that. Not everybody has that love of the game. Not everyone has perspective, and not everyone can connect with the listeners the way you guys do. So it's a real blessing.
Thanks, man. I'm glad you could hop on here with us. Neal, quickly.
Yeah.
Florida basketball. What to expect?
Fantastic.
There we go. If you don't know, guys, Neal Blackmon, host for Florida Basketball Hour as well. So if you need your basketball fix, you can definitely get it there. Everybody know about that, Neal, right quick.
Yeah, no, check out Florida Basketball Hour. We're rolling through the fall camp previews, talking about the big battle at the point guard position, which is interesting. I know, speaking of fan base getting what it wants and now going, okay, now what? Were we right? Andrew Nembhard is off to Gonzaga, because that's where all players that aren't good enough to play and in the Power Six get to go. We'll see. We'll see who's starting point guard. Eric Fawcett, GatorCountry.com, joins me for that. Be sure to check us out on Twitter at Florida BB Hour, and anywhere you can stream your podcast. After you listen to Gators Breakdown, of course, you can play us. And I recommend 1.5 speed based on my proclivity to have these long Barack Obama pauses when I talk. but it's fun. Or like even Donald Trump, like sentence fragments. Like I don't differentiate through political ideology. I'm just bad at talking. So like fast forward.
Good stuff here. Neal and Eric do a great job there covering Florida basketball.
Fantastic.
Yeah, everybody go check that out. So that'll do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.